Hello again, welcome to the final video of the week, and this time I'm looking at the 3 and 4 Musketeers, which is the Richard Lester film from the 70s, starring Oliver Reed, Michael York, Charlton Heston, Faye Dunaway, Kel Welsh, Frank Finlay, Richard Chamberlain, and hosts of others. This is an all-star cast for 2 films. And it's famous that it was made as one film, but the film was so large that it would not work as one film, so it's cut into 2. The actors were contracted for one film, so they had to make more payments to them to release the second one, which worked out fine ultimately. Some people were a bit annoyed with it, but generally it worked out fine. It was there's different explanations of why. Like some people say that Lester suggested early on, so it was too big. There's no way we can cut it in half. There's no way we can actually cut it down to be a 2-hour film. It needs to be like cut in half and just arrange deals that way. And there's other ones saying, "Oh, it's much later on," you realised. But they basically kind of edited it and cut it down for 2 films. So they did the first one, scored it all, and then they finished the second one off and released that as well. The thing is, the film does actually work better as one film. It works really well as 2 films. It was very enjoyable, but I have actually watched it just as one film, and it works really well because there is a progression. It starts out very, very comedic, and then it gets darker and darker as the film goes on. And there is a kind of tone to it. It's very Richard Lester because he does slapstick, but there is a kind of melancholy tone to his films as well. And this film kind of goes from one to the other over the 3 or 4 hours. So you get the best of his slapstick, you also get the best of his melancholy. But you need to watch both films for that. When it was released, basically the view was a lot of people enjoyed the first film more because it was sillier and more enjoyable and more of a swashbuckler. The second film was viewed as a bit darker and less fun. But a lot of people prefer the second one, like me. And when we're reading the Oliver Reed biography, it turns out he likes the second one better as well. Which of course he would, because the second one was basically his film. So it dealt with his character. So that's that. But they're both very enjoyable. So what happened was they decided to do a Musketeer film. They got one director who didn't work out, and then someone suggested Richard Lester, who was having a downturn in his career. He'd made the Beatles films, he'd made The Knack, he'd made A Funny Thing Happened to Waiting for Him, he'd made Petulia, A Bed Sitting Room, How I Won the War. So he started out as a big hits, and then slowly was making more serious films that were less popular with the audience, and The Bed Sitting Room was a massive financial disaster. So he was in the dumps career-wise. And this is the film that took him back out of the dumps, and he had another 6 or 7 years of making really terrific films. I mean, after this, he made Robin and Marion, which is wonderful. He made Superman 2 and 3 and helped supervise 1, which people forget about, that he was on set for 1 as well. And he helped organize the end and do things with it. He made Cuba, which is very underrated. He made Butch and Sundance, The Aliyahs, which is very underrated. He made lots of stuff. He made The Ritz, which I'm not very keen on. But he made Juggernaut, which is wonderful. So he was doing lots of things, and he was very busy through this time. And basically, this film was really started. He made The Royal Flush as well. Royal Flush is wonderful. Malcolm McDowell and Oliver Reed, it's wonderful. Not as wonderful as this film. But the 3 and 4 Musketeers are perfect. Later on, he made The Return of the Musketeers, a sequel, which had a tragedy. Roy Kinnear, who plays Planchette in these films, died on set because of an accident, and what happened at the hospital later. There were lawsuits involved later, and that stopped Lester from ever making another film. It just totaled him completely. Of course, he was friends with Kinnear. So what happened with the death just totally totaled them. So that's the kind of dark side of this tale. Basically, is like the sequel, which was actually a lot of Burn's reputation, and I do have it actually coming to me on Blu-ray just now. But I'm not going to wait. I was not going to wait for that to arrive to do this video. So the film takes the Dumas novel, and Dumas novel is more serious. The Dumas novel has a sense of humor, but there's characters, there's more depth too. Like Aramis, played by Richard Chamberlain, is a much more religious, more interesting character in the book, and a bit more political in the book compared to what he is in the film. But it's just a case of concession, really. It's just a case of what will work for the film, and the film takes the humor side of the book, but also expands on it to show the absurdities of the rich, how they treat the poor, and the general. It takes place as these musketeers are at the service of the rich. It's a very unfair system, and when they're not working, they're left to do whatever they want to do, and they get into a lot of trouble. So it's based on a very working class thing of like these are the guys who work for these rich pompous idiots, and these rich pompous idiots run the world and cause all the problems, and these guys are the ones who are getting sword fights and all the other things to solve the problems of these stupid rich. And it does. It's one of those things. Is because Lester's a smart man, he knows not to like waggle the finger anyway. Just like this is what it is. This is the way this system works. And now you decide what you think of it. We'll let you decide. We'll have the characters behave the way the characters would, but you can decide whether they're stupid or whether they're smart or whether they're tragic or whatever. You can decide on your own. We're not going to tell you. So he's more honest with D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan, in a lot of the films, a lot of the film versions of that story, is a naive young man. And this one, he's also a naive young man. But this film shows up, he's kind of stupid at times. And at times, I mean, a lot. He does not learn from the mistakes very much. And Michael York plays him as someone who is full of boyish enthusiasm, but he's not very bright. He means well, but he's not very bright. And his attention can get swayed quite easily. And Lester has a lot of fun with that aspect to him. Well, in other novels, he's a bit more pure and he's a bit more boring, really. This is a much better version of D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan is much more fun in this one, where he's dealing with slapstick situations. He volunteers for stuff that no one else wants to volunteer for. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, really? You're doing this now too? Why? Like the Musketeers would rather be at home drinking than dealing with half the stuff they deal with in these films because of D'Artagnan being D'Artagnan. And it's hilarious. It's constantly hilarious. Like I watched both these films on 4K, the new 4K release, on my projector, on the screen that way. And I showed them to my nephew who's 13, and he loved them. And he also loved how stupid D'Artagnan was, like how dumb he was. And he loved commenting how dumb this guy was. Because it was funny, because like it was so obvious that people making it around the joke. You know, this guy is an idiot. And it's also good as even though it's a comedy, there's a sense of humor. Like Christopher Lee is the villain, Rochefort, and Charlton Heston as Cardinal Richelieu. Play it straight. They're villains. They may have a sense of humor at times, but they are villains. They are out for themselves. They're going to do what they want. They say it's for France, but they have lots of different reasons for doing what they do, and they are bad people. There's no ambiguity, and that's what really works. Is there's always a threat. Like the villains are serious. They're not jokey villains. You can have a bit of slapstick with the phone a bomb sometimes, and because of trying to do a fight on ice, and other times they'll kill people. You know, it's like you see the human side of they have to deal with the real world, but also they do some crazy stuff that's really impressive, or they can order deaths of people who don't deserve it. And it's the same with Musketeers. Musketeers sometimes are very goofy, but then and sometimes the fighting styles are, unconventional, but they do get the job done generally. They also get drunk. They are mischievous. They get in lots of trouble. They're sometimes their own worst enemy, and they're just very enjoyable characters. I mean, the Musketeer that comes to the forefront is Athos, played by Oliver Reed, because he's a character who has the tragic past. Like his character had a dalliance with Milady years ago, played by Faye Dunaway, that ruined his life. And Reed, because Reed's the great Byronic romantic figure, can play the tragedy, but also be funny in scenes. Like there's the tragedy of the character is always there, but also there's a sense of humour about it, and a sense of, well, that's the life. I was a moron. What do you expect? We're all stupid, you know. But there's also the grace of the way he plays it as well. It's like he can be both the tragic figure, but also a buffoon at times. Porthos, played by Frank Finlay, is the idiot of the bunch. Doesn't have a clue what's going on half the time. And usually Porthos is a character who's the other musketeer. Like you have D'Artagnan is the naive young man, Athos is the tragic figure, Aramis is the smart one, and Porthos is the other one usually. It's the part that basically, once I've cast the other actors, like, well, who can we get to play Porthos? Who cares? Get somebody. Doesn't matter. He's that kind of character. So Finlay plays him as a buffoon, but it's really funny because he does stupid things throughout, and he's basically the source of a lot of the Richard Lester gags, very Richard Lester-y, silly gags. A lot of it goes to Frank Finlay. Aramis is probably the least developed. He's the most mysterious of the bunch. Richard Chamberlain plays him, and he worked with Lester before on Petulia, so they brought him in to play Aramis. But he's a less to do, but he still does it well. There's a really good chemistry between them all. They do seem like pals who are just hanging out with each other, up to no good and enjoying themselves. And you get that sense of fun. And they've also got Roy Kinnear as Planchette, who's D'Artagnan's manservant, who's always carrying stuff and getting in trouble, and he's always been abused by the Musketeers. But that's those like five are like the main group throughout the film, and the other characters that come through, like Raquel Welch has the bumbling love interest. So normally films of the love interest have been very romantic, and this one she's very clumsy. She's not very bright. That's the big thing about this film is neither the hero or the heroine are very bright, and most of the time they don't seem to have a clue what's going on, as part of the bigger picture. You also have some really nice bits of nastiness. Like Milady's nasty. She's out for vengeance a lot of the time, and she doesn't care who she hurts. There's lots of side characters who they run into who have their own lives, and so you see signs of life beyond the palace and beyond the machinations of the various people. And you see the servants sometimes going, "Oh God, she's heavy now, hasn't she? I just have to carry the carriage thing for her. Like, I should lose weight." And Milady's like basically handmaiden is having sex with D'Artagnan behind her Milady's back and stuff like that. It's just wonderful bits of silliness. And there's just lots of stuff, like they have a scene taking place where they clean all the rich people's clothes. They have a fight scene in that section. There's a great bit where Duke of Buckingham, played by Simon Ward, gets killed because Milady has seduced this Protestant extremist, religious extremist, to make him think that his master is a devil and things like that. There's lots of nice little bits of darkness. Richard Lester is very good at the kind of bigger budget fare, is like having it fun, and then suddenly something dark happens. It's like, oh, that's nasty. Like anyone who grew up with Superman 3 remembers evil Superman and the sister turns into a robot, which is kind of nightmare fuel if you're a kid. It's like people ripping that film because it probably scared the hell out of some of them. So yeah, the films are just wonderful in detail. There's some great gags about what the rich get up to with them playing chess with the dogs, and the fact that the king is completely clueless and does not have anything close to a clue. a lot of the machinations is to try and expose the Queen and make her look unfaithful to the King, so the King will be more loyal to Richelieu's ways and things like that. And it's just Richelieu wants to start a war. There's some wonderful stuff where the Musketeers have to avoid the Cardinal's spy, so they end up going into this fort so they can talk amongst themselves. Well, this little outside the fort and are fighting these other enemies so they can talk amongst themselves away from the spies in their own camp. And they end up causing a push forward that wins the fort. There's lovely little details like that throughout. And again, it was shot in Spain during the Franco time because they basically said what they said was it was a similar type of buildings. And during Franco's time, if you knew who to pay off, you'd always get access to the buildings you needed basically. So they would just pay the officials off who are corrupt. They'd always get these access to these amazing buildings to add to production value. So the producers were smart in that way. They were smart about shooting 2 films at once, not telling anybody. It was a film that it was done with lots of deviousness, but also it was done on budget because Richard Lester was one of those directors that planned ahead everything. He hired good people to know what they were doing, who could change at the last minute if need be. If something went wrong, you could always shooting something. So it was always a very professional crew, and apparently a lot of actors loved working with him because he was in and out, straight to the point, getting things done. Which is what the producers love. There's a story Charlton Heston tells a bit like because he shot El Cid in Spain 10 years before when they were shooting something. He looked at me and goes, "I've shot here before. I shot El Cid here," and Lester goes, "Okay, where did they put the cameras?" Like, in other words, was there any good shots here that I can just use? It's like, which is a nice little bit of humour. So 3 and 4 Musketeers are wonderful. They do have a great ending as well. I mean, they do have they play around and have fun and games, but the ending is dark. The ending, they really go for it, for the darkness and the sense of tragedy, the sense of some people die in this that would not die in lots of blockbusters. A lot of blockbusters would not have certain people die. So it is rather wonderful in so many ways. Both of these films were films I grew up with. I've seen them countless times. I'll rewatch them countless times more, I assume. These are just perennial favourites for me, so I cannot recommend them highly enough. I just say go watch them. They are wonderful. They are so good. So that's me for the week. That's me done the Oliver Reed week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it inspires you to go and watch this wonderful madman of an actor and more of his films. That's me for now. Bye.